Hi there. Welcome to Game of Our Own, a podcast about women who work in sports. I'm your host, Jahaan. I bring you stories of women who are game changers, incredible leaders, and trailblazers in the sports industry. You will get a behind-the-scenes look of how they navigated their journey, valuable lessons they learned along the way, and advice for high-achieving women just like you. I'm excited you're here. Let's do this. How do you recover from failure? What do you do when you get knocked down? How quickly do you bounce back? My next guest, Jillian Waitkus, graduated college 4 years ago and today is a director of events and promotions for the Louisville Bats. I'm really excited for you to listen to this interview. During our conversation, she talks about what's helped her get to this point, showing up for herself, managing negativity, how to turn failure into a win, and feeling the fear and doing it anyway, which is one of my personal favorites. Jillian is one of my coaching clients, and I know her story of overcoming adversity, and it's been an honor to support her on her journey. I'm so happy that she got super candid during this interview, and I think you guys are really going to love hearing about how she got knocked down and what tools she used to get back up and come back stronger than ever. I hope you guys enjoy this one. Hey, Jillian, thanks for joining.
Of course. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
I am too. And I'm really excited for everyone to hear about your journey in sports. I think it's an impressive one, given your age and given that you're just out of college practically, and you've made some huge strides. But before we get there, I want you to take us back before you were in college and really to that moment when you fell in love with sports. And you decide that's the route you wanted to take for your career. So talk us through that.
Absolutely. I think there were kind of two different points. You know, there's a point where I fell in love in sports, which was pretty much right away. From the first Reds baseball game that I went to, I knew that sports was something that was always going to hold a very special place in my heart. There's just something about the energy of being inside of a stadium, and all these different people from different walks of life and background are all there coming together for one purpose, and that's to kind of step away from life and take in a game. And it's something that everybody can rally around. And that's really what kind of drew me into sports. Mm-hmm. I grew up playing sports. I was a 4-sport athlete. Every season I was doing something, whether it was swimming or basketball, soccer, volleyball, field hockey. I've pretty much tried them all. So sports was always something that was very important to me in my life, as well as being active, but also, you know, working on a team. It always just brought so much joy to me to just rally around something that so many people can be a part of. I grew up going to a lot of different stadiums. My dad was an avid sports fan, so anytime we went on vacation, it was very important to him to let us see different arenas and stadiums. So I kind of just piggybacked off of his love for sports. And I always wanted to soak up as much information about, you know, certain types of plays, or, you know, why the pitcher threw different pitches. Mm-hmm. Just kind of the little aspects of everything that went into each of the sports I was just fascinated by. Mm-hmm. So I grew up always kind of being the little boy that my dad never had. And I always was down to go to games. I wanted to see the different arenas, the different stadiums, how they ran, how the fans were, what the different kind of entertainment aspects were. Mm-hmm. That for me, that was the number one thing that I liked to do in my free time, was either play a sport or go to games.
How old were you for your first game?
I think for my first game, I was probably about definitely 2. And that was when I grew up going to a lot of Cincinnati Bearcats games, Bengals games, some Ohio State Buckeyes games as well. So I can just, you know, really remember that. Yeah. I can remember some of my earliest memories are, you know, obviously when you're that young and you're around that big of a crowd, that's something that's always going to be memorable. But I think more so was just the feeling of community, of the tailgating and the being around all the cheering fans and knowing that something really exciting is going on. That always stuck with me from a very young age. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then I think that the point that I realized that I wanted to work in sports probably wasn't until the end of high school. I did not play sports in high school. but I
Okay.
did do broadcast journalism. So I led the news broadcast for my high school here in Louisville. Assumption High School is where I went. And I did a lot of the sports segments. And while I wasn't actually on the field, I always loved covering them and being able to share what's going on with other people. And that's when I kind of really decided, okay, maybe broadcast journalism, specifically sports journalism, is something that I'd like to do. So I had all of the intention of going into college and being a journalism major and being the next Erin Andrews. That's really what I wanted to do for myself. But then I kind of realized, okay, this is a really, really competitive field. I'm not really sure if this is something that I want to do. And that's when, I kind of utilized a lot of my internships, which were mostly with nonprofits, to kind of feel out, okay, what do I want to do? Because I wasn't 100% sold on sports journalism. I knew that I wanted to do something that was, along the lines of events, whether if that was going to be in sports, I didn't really know, but I knew that nonprofits was a really good way to kind of get that experience and figure out, okay, are events something that I want to do? Because I always liked being around a lot of people, and I always thought it was amazing when you go to some sort of event and you're just thinking, wow, this is awesome. Somebody put a lot of work into making this happen. I want to be one of those people.
Going from 2 years old to your first game to what you do now. So I know what you do now. So why don't you tell everybody what your title is and who you work for?
So I am the director of promotions and events for the Louisville Bats baseball team, which is in Louisville, Kentucky. We are the AAA affiliate of the Cincinnati Reds. What my job is it covers a lot of different areas of our operation and what we do. We wear a lot of hats working in minor league baseball, but to put it as simple as possible for you all, I am the person that makes the fun things happen. So any of the fun theme nights that we're doing out at the ballpark, I'm the one putting those together and designing, what enhancements can we bring to the night to really bring this theme alive. But also putting together any of the events that we do to support our season, whether it's preseason, postseason, autograph sessions, anything like that. That's kind of another additional added value to our fans I put together. And then I also organize all of our non-game day events. So that's anything that is not related to the Bats directly, whether it's rentals, nonprofits coming in, or businesses that want to come in and utilize the ballpark. I'm the one that sells and coordinates those, as well as brainstorming up new ways that we can get people through the gates that aren't baseball related. So whether that's concerts or beer festivals, food truck rallies, I've done some boxing matches, just about anything under the sun that's going to bring kind of new life to the ballpark.
I think boxing will do it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely a lot different than baseball.
So I don't want to put you on the spot, but what year did you graduate?
I graduated May 2016 from the University of Kentucky with a Bachelor of Business Administration in Marketing and a minor in Spanish.
So 4 years ago, you are, fresh out of college, so much so that you remember every detail of your major. Now I'm always like, I was accounting. No, it wasn't. Marketing. But not to date myself. So 2016, you graduate, and here you are, it's 2020, and you are a director for a sports team.
Yep.
How did you make that journey? That's not an easy thing to do. I don't care what level you are, major league sports, minor league sports, it's not an easy thing to do. How did you get there?
So I think it's good to start off and say that, when I graduated in 2016, I never dreamed of being where I am now and
not
in this
even
position.
A little bit?
I did, I knew that I had the drive and the passion for it. If I really wanted to get there, I knew I eventually would. I just don't think that I thought that it would be this quickly. I'd say a part of me was definitely a little bit surprised in myself, but at the same time, I also knew, you deserved this. You put all the work in the world in. So it's something that you should really relish and appreciate, but also share with others, how you got there. I think that the reason why I am in the position that I'm in today is, a lot of perseverance. There was a lot of times that I was knocked back, but I never gave up, whether that was things not going as planned with events or, turbulent times with some of the places that I worked in the past. I think that always kind of coming up and showing up to work every day and being ready to work really helps me get to where I am. I feel like I've earned a lot of respect from a lot of people, and also, from myself. I think that that's really important too, especially if you have big dreams for yourself, is even when you get knocked down, still being able to stand up and go after what you want.
I agree. I love that. I don't love to get knocked down, but what I do love is when I do get knocked down, when I get back up and I show up and I do the things and I get back on track. So that's when I become I feel strong. Talk to me a little bit about that. I think that's really interesting. So you got knocked down a lot. I know some of your stories. I'm not going to tell them. They're not my stories to tell. But talk a little bit about what did you use to help you when you got knocked down? Because no matter what, anyone who's listening right now, all these women in sports and men too, whoever's listening, we're going to get knocked down. It's inevitable. It's Absolutely. Going to happen, and it's going to happen a lot. So what do you do to help yourself build yourself back up?
Well, I think the first step is to, as we've talked about before, don't be afraid to fail. You're going to fail at some point. Mm-hmm. Take that and use that as a lesson learned. Don't just turn away from it. Don't just go ahead and sweep it under the rug and try to forget about it. Really turn in and be introspective and think, okay, this is why this happened. This is how I'm feeling about this. And this is how I'm going to make sure that it doesn't happen in the future, or these are the changes that I'm going to make. Or if it does happen again in the future, this is how I'm going to react to it. Kind of taking it and spinning it as a positive rather than a negative is the best way, I think, to handle being knocked down. And I can confidently say that that's the best way to handle it, because I was a very negative person for most of my life. Anytime something happened to me, it was never my fault. It was everybody else's fault. It was just something that was happening to me. Mm-hmm. Now that I've kind of taken the mindset that everything that happens to me, whether it's negative or positive, it's happening for me. There's a reason why this is happening. There's a lesson to be learned from it. Mm-hmm. And I don't just want to skip over it, as hurtful and painful and shameful as it might be to think about my failure or my mistake that has happened. I need to really do a little bit deeper of a dive and dig into it and figure out, okay, why did this happen? And, what can I do in the future to take from this and, make it something better, or not let it happen again in the future. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's really a big part of it. It's just kind of that introspection of, okay, why did this happen? Another part I think is important is leaning on other people, and not so much to the point where you're putting all of, that weight and that burden on other people, but just asking people for advice and also sharing with them how you're feeling about the situation. Now, there's definitely a fine line, especially in the professional world, between sharing, mm-hmm. everything, showing all your cards to people, and, asking for advice, especially from people that have been in the industry for a while and have probably gone through what you're going through. Yes. They're going to tell you the best way to handle it, but they're also going to be able to tell you their side of the story and kind of, okay, when this happened to me, this is how I handled it. This is how I bounced back. Not being afraid to share your failures with people. I think that only helps you grow, both of you, even more by being able to share that. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's important. But maybe the biggest thing that has always helped me when I've gotten knocked down is remembering my why. Why am I doing this? I've dreamt about this since I was such a little girl. I'm not about to just give it up now just because I made a teeny mistake. I know that when things happen to you in the workplace that seem like, how am I going to get through this day? How am I going to get through this next week? How am I going to get past this project? And it's just so daunting. It's really important to say, okay, why am I doing this? For me, what's always been important to me is I've been a very ambitious person. I've always been somebody that's a natural born leader. And I think that the reason why both of those qualities are so important to me is because I want to be able to make other people feel like they can achieve their dreams. Uh-huh. So I think kind of trying to remember, okay, if I want to be that person, then I have to get through this. I have to keep going. And I can't let this little thing knock me down. And it's not always little things. Right. Sometimes it's big things. Sometimes it's failed events. Sometimes it's not selling enough tickets. Sometimes it's not being on the same page as your boss or your colleagues. And it seems so daunting in the moment. And you just don't know, how am I ever going to bounce back from this? But you have to get from A to B, you've got to get through it.
This is fantastic. All of these are really good. A lot of them gave me the chills as you were saying them. It's interesting too, right? So women in sports, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves because what we know is it's a male dominated industry. Yes, absolutely. We're trying to make changes, but it's the reality of it. It's a male dominated industry, and we put these unrealistic pressures on ourselves. So when things happen, when you fail, they almost feel 10 or 20 times as worse as if you were just in a women dominated industry. Like, it just, for some reason, because it's male dominated and we're trying to break through and make a difference, when these failures happen, they seem to hurt a lot more. But I'm loving what you're saying. So you're saying deeper dive, right, into whatever that failure was. Don't just push it away. Learn from it. Turn it into a teaching moment would be number 2. I love this one. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I think, for me, when I was junior in my career, I felt like a failure meant I didn't want to ask for help. I didn't want to tell anybody. Like, some things are, people can see what happened, but I didn't want to ask for help. I just wanted it to go away. I think once I realized that's not going to help me, it made such a huge difference in the trajectory of my career and how I was able to learn from those. And then I think the remembering why is really like that. That's something where you can dig deep. That's something where you can really, it grounds you almost. It becomes like your true north, and you really are like, this is why I do what I do. It's okay. Like, there's just a few things in the road. It's going to be a part of my story, and it'll always be a good one. Down the line, maybe I'll be able to laugh at it.
Yeah, for sure. I've definitely been there.
I love those. Thank you for sharing. Let's go back to this fabulous director role. Talk to us about how you went from entry level to a director. Take us through that timeline. So you were hired in ticket sales, right?
Yep. So I was hired in July 2019 with the Louisville Bats as a account executive. I came in at a time where we had new leadership, and there was really a need for some fresh salespeople in the office. Prior to that, I was with the Lexington Legends, which is the minor league team in Lexington, Kentucky. I had been with them for 3.5 seasons, wore a lot of hats there, but everybody sells. Especially in this industry, it is so important that you recognize early on that even if you come in and you are not in a sales role, you are going to be, not, sometimes you'll be asked, sometimes you'll be expected to sell. But I think that this kind of applies to any industry that you're in. You're always going to have to sell. And it might not be to other people outside of the office or consumers. It might be to your boss or your coworkers. So I had experience selling just about everything, whether it was tickets to, corporate partnerships, special events, which is what I'm doing now. I had quite the kind of smorgasbord of what I had sold in the past. So when I was brought on back in July by the Bats, I started out in ticket sales. I, did a really, really good job with that. I had a lot of ideas that I brought to the table as far as group theme nights and promotions. And, well, what if we tried to sell tickets this way? Or what if we did, something that supported these people? Just really kind of trying to come up with what are creative ways that we can get people to come together and want to come out to a game. But even more importantly than that, celebrate them, because in the end, what you're doing is you're creating memories. You're not just selling tickets to games, you're creating memories. I did a really great job with that. And then at the end of the season, we opened up some new positions. We're kind of in a transitional period in our organization right now. And we have a really, really big need for more special events and more exciting promotions. As always, as a team, we're always trying to sell more tickets season to season. A really big goal for us in 2020 is, taking our ballpark and not only being a venue that's known for baseball. We want our venue to be known as an elite special events venue in the whole state of Kentucky. So my organization opened up a position for director of promotions and events. They were looking for somebody that had, 3 to 4 years of experience in special events, also had some background in sales, had worked on building out promotions and theme nights, from the actual conception all the way through coordination and execution. That really enticed me when I heard that. I had already been there for probably about 3 or 4 months, so not really long. But as soon as I saw that job description, I was like, wow, this is kind of my dream job. If I could think up what kind of position I want for myself at this point in my career, this would be it. And I did have a little bit of doubt in my mind about myself of, oh, well, you're just kind of this lowly account executive on the totem pole.
And you'd been there how long? For how long?
I had been there. So I was hired in July, and then that description was posted in September. So I had been there for 3 months when they made the announcement to us as an office that they were looking for a director of promotions and events. But that want in my heart never really went away, even when I was kind of doubting myself and pushing it off to the side. And, I had even talked to some people and said, hey, this is what I think that I'm going to go for. Some people were super supportive of it, and some people were not supportive of it. They didn't think that I would realistically get it. So I think that, some people's fear kind of spoke to me a little bit. So it was kind of tugging both way, but I'm not one of those people that is not going to go for it. And that's something that I hope that people take away from our conversation that we're having today is don't be afraid to go for it. I mean, the worst thing that they can say to you is no. And at the very least, it's going to be a good experience, of interview skills and, hearing feedback about yourself. So I went for it, after having great conversations with you and kind of consulting with some families and friends and mentors and former colleagues of, hey, do you think that I would be a good fit for this? Because you've got to consider your side of it as well. Especially working in sports, it's a huge time commitment. You make a lot of sacrifices. And this was a huge jump from being a salesperson to a director of a department of 1. And there were a lot of expectations on this role. And there are some pretty high goals that were set for the person that were coming into this role. So I knew it wasn't going to be easy. I knew it was going to be challenging, but it just lit a fire in my heart that I knew that I couldn't not go for this position because I would never be able to forgive myself if I didn't. So I went for it.
Right there. The regret is almost, yes, you have a passion and you're ambitious, but that living with yourself, if you don't do it, is almost worse than going through the uncomfortableness of applying for a new job, the uncomfortable, the vulnerability when you put yourself out there within the organization for everyone to see. And I think a lot of folks go and they do it, but they feel the sense of like, I put myself out here. Everyone knows I'm going for it. And if I don't get it, I still have to go to work the next day at the same job and see the same people who knew I was going for a promotion. So that takes a lot of courage. It's just 100%. Feeling that fear and doing it anyway. And I think you said something else that was really, really key is that you asked a lot of people what they thought. And some people thought that fear was their first reaction, right? Like they were like, what do you know? You shouldn't do that. And maybe they were, projecting their own feelings of what they were doing, but you were able to hear them, but ultimately you did what you knew what was right for you, even though not everyone agreed with what you were doing. Is that right?
Absolutely. That's exactly where I was going with that. I think that I love that you used courage because while we're kind of talking through this, that was the one word that kept coming up in the back of my mind is courage. It took a lot of courage to fill out that application, submit it, go to my boss and tell him, hey, I just want to let you know that I've applied for this and I would really appreciate the opportunity to be considered. That took a lot of courage because, as I, said a few minutes back, I'd only been there 3 months. I was still relatively new to the organization, relatively new to, my boss. While I had a very great relationship with him, I wasn't really sure how he was going to take it. I wasn't really sure how HR was going to take it. But luckily for me, it was all a positive experience. While it was scary, I definitely had their support in it. So that was awesome as well as just to even be considered. I felt so blessed and so lucky. from there, I was interviewed by my boss and then two other people in the organization, one of them being our vice president, and then the other, which is our director of marketing, who I work with very, very closely. So they kind of dug a little bit deeper into me because being in sales, I had not interacted with them a lot. Our boss, which is the president of the team, I had worked with very closely because he was the one that hired me and brought me on for my sales position. And I was still interacting with him quite a bit, even though I was an account executive.
Uh-huh.
And then when it came to the other two gentlemen that I work with, I hadn't really had a lot of interaction with them. So I feel like in a way that was almost a little bit more terrifying to me because I had to kind of, convince them of, this is the experience that I've had in the past. And that's something I haven't really touched on yet. When I worked in Lexington, I handled all of the special events. I did all the promotions. I did all the social media. That was a lot smaller of a team. So we had a lot smaller of a front office. So I had the ability to have my hands on a lot of those different departments and also, manage a lot. So that was experience that I'd had in the past that I hadn't 100% been able to translate into my new position in Louisville and hadn't been able to share with a lot of people. And that was really hard for me too, because you see so much going on, especially, on the marketing and social media side of things. And I wanted to be able to share my experience and my knowledge with them, but that wasn't my department. So as much as I would, feed them some ideas, I didn't want to overstep my boundaries. Finally being able to sit down with Tony, who's our director of marketing, during my interview process and share my ideas with him and what I've done in the past, it was just so exhilarating for me because it's something that I felt like I'd been holding in for a while since I had been there. Luckily he was super supportive and on board and impressed by, just kind of my knowledge and what I had done with experience in the past, as well as our VP. And I think for me, kind of the turning point in my interview process that made me kind of think, okay, I finally am confident that I might have a real shot at getting this position was just when they were able to tell me, I think that you would be a great fit for this. There's a lot of things that I've seen in you, even since you've been here just as a salesperson, that tell me that, you have what it takes. And that's very impressive because a lot of people come in and this is just a job for them. It's not a vocation. It's something that they just come in, they put in their 9 to 5 and, they leave everything at the door, which of course you should do. There's always boundaries, sure. But it's something that they could see in me and the energy that I kind of brought to the office is that they knew that I was serious about this. And this is something that I was invested in and wanted to be a part of, and wanted to grow within the organization. So me being able to hear them say that as somebody who was so deep in my head of thinking, oh my God, am I good enough for this? Like they've only seen a little bit of me. They don't know everything that I'm capable of. I also have only been there for 3 months. They probably don't even know anything about me. And they're thinking this girl thinks that she can really come in here and try to interview for this job. And it just gave me such comfort that despite as much as I was in my head, that wasn't what I was showing to my colleagues and in the office. And that wasn't the energy that I was bringing. In the long run, my interview process for this position started long before this whole entire position was even created or posted. It started from the moment that I walked in the door for the first day. And I think that that's something really important to share with people is the energy that you bring to the office, everyone notices it. And that's something that I have been trying to share with a lot of the folks in my office. So I'm in charge of our culture club, which is a select group of people from each of the departments that come together. We do the fun things, planning the employee outings, employee of the month, different little perks, but also, how can we make this place better? And one thing that has been really, really important to me, and I think has really helped us in the past few months is reminding everybody that the attitude and the energy that you bring into the office is contagious and people are going to notice it. And when people come in and they are having a bad day, everyone can tell and it affects the whole entire office. And when you come in and you are happy despite it all, or you've had a big win, or you're celebrating one of your colleagues and you're putting kind of your wants and your needs on the back burner and you're appreciating somebody else in the office, or you're supporting somebody else in the office, they're going to notice that. And it's also going to be a chain reaction. Other people are going to pick up on that, and, you know, that energy is going to shift onto them. So that's something that I've really been trying to plug away on a lot of the people that I am colleagues with, just because I feel like that has been something that has helped me a lot in my career, is kind of that energy shift. And it wasn't always that way at all. So that's why it was really, really exciting for me to hear from my counterparts that it was something that they saw within me and they noticed in me. And I do think it was a big part of my hiring.
That's interesting.
So
the energy that other people bring into the office and the energy you always bring. You said it wasn't always like that. So are you talking about previous jobs and previous roles, or talk about that and how, if you're in the middle of that, how is somebody ambitious like you keep yourself centered on your why?
I think the first part that I like to talk about is the internal energy of myself, and then I'll go on and talk a little bit about external energy and office energy and how you can stay focused during that. So for me, I have always struggled with negativity. I've always been one of those people that if I get in a bad mood or if something happens to me that day, it's really hard for me to shake it. You know, and in some of my previous roles, it was very, very evident to the people that I worked with if I was having a bad day. As I kind of grew and matured, I started to realize that it was leaking into, you know, other parts of the office. But at first I didn't at all. And, you know, that would lead to, you know, negative feedback from my managers. It would lead to coworkers of mine feeling like they couldn't come and talk to me because I was just going to flip my lid on them, which I didn't usually, but it's, when somebody's in a bad mood all the time, you're really unapproachable, and it's hard to get work done when you're unapproachable. As I had taken some blows early on in my career, and I had made some mistakes and made some failures and not done some of the things that we talked about earlier, like being able to consult others and just kind of trying to sweep it under the rug, it was only feeding in more negative energy into me. So I think really kind of one of the turning points for me was when I had an event in Lexington that I'd worked months on, and it did okay, but there wasn't a lot of alignment on expectations between myself, administration, and the third-party vendor that was in. So that made it very, very difficult. And for me, it was a failure in my eyes, just because it kind of turned into a big mess. Well, it didn't look like it on the outside. Inside, it definitely felt that way. And that set me back for quite a few months, where I just didn't feel like I was good enough to do anything. It was just that negativity was weighing on me so hard, and speaking to myself of, you're not good enough. Remember last time you did such a bad job on this. Why do you think that you can do any other event that's bigger and grander than this when this was such a failure? And I finally just said, you know, I'm sick of it. You know, I want to be the best version of myself in this role, and I want to grow my career. And this is just another stepping stone. So I can't let this hold me back. So not only that, but I knew that I needed to get out of that mindset, that poor me mindset.
So that mindset lasted for a couple of months?
Oh gosh, from that instance, at least 3 or 4 months. But that was something I had been living for years, was the poor me, pity me mindset. And I don't want people to think that I'm just this positive, cheery, awesome person all the time, because I do still have some of those moments, because I'm human. And it happens. But such an important part of anyone's career and anyone's life really is overcoming. And that was really the first instance in my life that I had something so big that affected so many different people that I had to actually overcome. So once I kind of overcame all those feelings of not being good enough and making a mistake and being a failure, I finally realized, okay, a lot of this is my mindset. This has happened. It's over. There's not anything that I can change about it. I can learn from it. So how am I going to learn from it? How am I not going to let it happen again? But also, how am I not going to let this live in my mind forever? Because that was what I was struggling with, was, you know, waking up every day, going to work, and always having in the back of my mind, well, this happened. How do you overcome that? So for me, a lot of it came in talking to people about what had happened, but also then being able to pack it up and put it away. But also just remembering all the good that can come out of it. And the fact that it is a stepping stone, that's really nothing more than what it is right now, is a stepping stone. I won't ever have to relive through that ever again. So that has been really, really helpful for me in being positive, is just remembering it for what it is, but also being able to realize that positivity is contagious, going back to, and kind of who the person, you want to be is. Who does she look like? Who does he look like? Is he positive? Is he caring? Is he, spending time, focusing on himself, self-care? Kind of what does that future self look like, and start showing up as that person. And I think that that's really kind of what helped me become a positive person, is because I kind of just realized that I was over this person that I didn't want to be anymore. I wanted to strive for something bigger. So being positive at the core, I think, really comes down to choosing to be the person that you want to be, and choosing to feel the way that you want to feel, instead of just letting your emotions kind of overcome you and succumb you. I think that positivity is definitely a mindset of gratitude and of just making that decision every single day of, okay, this is how I'm going to react to this. Even if I'm not feeling this way, this is the way that I'm going to show up. And this is how I'm going to be around others, and how I'm going to talk to myself today. So I think that that was one big shift for me, was overcoming something that was so stuck in my mind in such a negative situation, and making the decision to not want to be that way anymore. For me, that was actually a really big win. It felt like a huge mistake in the time, but it was a really big win, because I feel like I'm a lot different of a person now just from that.
How do you turn a failure into a win?
Absolutely.
I'm sure there's like 1,000 books on that. And you just summed it up in this interview. But really, I mean, it sounds like to me, and stop me if I'm wrong here, but you felt it for 4 months, right? Like you felt it, and you call it a pity party, but I don't even know that it's a pity party. It's you're very, I know you, and I know you're very, very ambitious. And as a result, the big wins feel so big, but the big losses or the misses, whatever we want to call them, they feel so bad, right?
Yes.
So
yes,
it's hard, because it's not a pity party. It's I have real feelings, and this stuff hurts, and how do I deal with it? And whether you bounce back in a couple of days, which it sounds like you're there now, or you bounce back in 4 months, like you're getting your work done, but you know that you're not the best version of yourself. Whatever it takes, it's just feeling that, whatever name you want to call it. It's just feeling what you went through. And then I love what you did. You recognized it. One day you said, all right, this is not me. I need a mindset shift. I recognize that I want to just face it. And then you talk to your colleagues about what happened. And then you took it and turned it into a learning exercise, like almost, right? Like, all right, what can I do differently? How do I not do this again? My failure is now a teacher for me. It's no longer a failure, it's a teacher. And it helps with that whole mindset issue. So I think what you did there is, I think, is something you should pat yourself on the back. And I think others can learn. Just, it's okay. It's okay just to sit and feel it for a while and not be happy and cheery and bubbly. Get your work done. And but it's okay if that kind of hurt and it hit you hard. And I think what you're seeing and what others will see along their career and along their journey is that that period will get shorter, right? As you start to face it and you don't let it take over, or you just face it and you feel it and you just figure out what it is and unpack it and sit with it yourself, that recovery time, let's call it recovery time, will be a lot shorter. Thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah, of course.
That was awesome. So let's see, as we end here, what advice would you give women? This is a podcast on women in sports, and what advice would you give them in their career, no matter what stage of their career they're in?
I think that persistence is definitely key. As you know, has kind of been the theme of this whole entire interview, is just keep going, keep trying, keep reaching out to people and trying to get interviews, keep submitting applications, keep updating your resume, keep striving for more. It's so important for us, especially as women, to be putting ourselves out there and to not be afraid to do that, because without it getting too much into, men versus, women, men are always confident to put themselves out there because they don't really, have a lot to lose. And, we don't either, but I feel like it's been ingrained in us that we have been expected to kind of always kind of take the back seat and, not be as, ambitious and adventurous and, taking risks. So I think that that's kind of the most important thing, is to take those risks, because the reward's definitely going to be worth it. Another thing that I think is really important is to be a lifelong independent learner. Always be learning, always be developing new skills, always be sharpening them up, be listening to podcasts like you are now, be reading books, be talking to other people in your industry as well, and just kind of getting their take on things and their best practices, and kind of figuring out how did they get where they are today and what do I need to do to get to where you are. So I think always be learning is definitely the second takeaway that I think is really, really important for anyone, no matter if you are entry level or if you are a senior in your career right now. And then lastly, I would say always be grateful and always be kind, I think are important, and those go a really long way. And I know that those aren't quite as objective as the first two, but something that I've learned just within the past probably year is how much people, aren't grateful and aren't kind, especially in their trip up to the top. It can be really, really hard to not get sucked into yourself and your career path and, not wanting to help others or feeding to people what you've been fed on your career path and thinking, well, I didn't get it, so why should I be giving it to these people? But I would say that the most successful people that I have met and worked with, and even some of, just my mentors, that the way that they have really struck a chord in my mind and made me think, wow, I really want to be like that person, and how do I get to where they are, has been because they're thankful for the opportunities that they've been given and thankful for the people that have helped them along the way. And have also been kind enough to share with people, this is how I did it and this is how you can do it too. And, be able to just be supportive, because we've all got to have each other's backs. I think it's really important. And that's why networking is always at top of mind for me, is, how can I kind of make those connections? Because it is important, especially in the sports industry, and not necessarily always for just your personal gain of getting the next job or, making that connection so that you can eventually interview with somebody, but just so you can get to know people and connect with people and share experiences with the people. So I think that, at the core, just those two human emotions of being grateful and being kind, always, no matter what, it's going to get you a really long way.
I think that's good. That's great advice. You gave a lot of good stuff in here, so I think everyone's going to enjoy it. So thank you.
Great. Of course. I appreciate you having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Don't you feel like you were listening to a motivational speaker? I was getting the chills while Jillian was talking about her failures and how she used them as growth opportunities. It's exactly what they are. Failure becomes a growth opportunity if you look at it the right way. Hopefully from this interview, Jillian was able to give you some mindset tools that you can implement as you continue to grow. I really hope you enjoyed this interview. And if you want to connect with Jillian, you can find her on LinkedIn. Thank you for listening. I would love to stay connected with you. You can follow me on Instagram at Jahaan Blake, and don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. If you're interested in learning more about how I can support you in your journey in the sports industry, email me at jblake@thejblakegroup.com or send me a DM on Instagram. I look forward to hearing from you.